Okay, you're gonna have to see. I haven't seen you in a while. Fair.
All right, welcome everybody. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Bethany Sargent. I'm the Outreach Coordinator with the Clean Water Initiative Program, and I am joined by Jessica Bulova and Terisa Thomas. Jessica is our Wastewater Program Supervisor, and T is the Water Infrastructure Finance Supervisor with the Facilities Engineering Division, and they're going to be co-presenting on Vermont's Combined Sewer Overflows. We have a full house in the room, which is great to see everybody here. We may have folks participating online. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I guess if you have questions during the presentation, should folks just ask, or do you want to wait till the end?
I think we can probably take them as we go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Sounds good. Well, I will turn it over to you.
Okay. Well, hi, everybody. I'm Jessica Bulova with the Wastewater Program. And I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about the background, the rules, and the progress thus far. Combined sewer overflows. So what are combined sewer overflows and why do we have them? Combined sewer overflows occur because when many municipalities and towns were first built, their infrastructure was built to combine both domestic sewage and storm drains and downspouts from rooftops, and industries in town were also connected all in one pipe that's under the roads for the villages and towns. And this was done in an effort to clean stormwater. So stormwater transports pollutants such as litter, animal wastes, salts, sediments, pesticides, fertilizers, and oil and grease. So the ability for that to go to a wastewater treatment facility and be treated prior to discharging to our surface waters keeps our surface waters cleaner. This works very well during a normal rain event. The issue occurs when you have an extreme high duration, high intensity storm, or during the winter months when we have a snowpack and we get higher temperatures and there's a lot of snow melt and then we get rain on top of that. What happens is there's too much water, and the wastewater treatment facilities aren't able to process all of that water. And so what happens is it goes out the combined sewer outfall. It's kind of, some people refer to it almost as a safety valve for the wastewater treatment facility and your homes, because if we don't allow this to happen, it could back up in homes and overwhelm the treatment facility. This is actually quite a common problem across the nation. There are, EPA estimates, 772 cities that are dealing with combined sewer outfalls, and it affects about 40 million people in the United States. Now, one thing that I do want to kind of debunk is this image that I think a lot of people have based on, I think, our media to an extent, that these overflows are sewage just dumping into our rivers and our lakes and streams. And that's really not the case. It's mostly stormwater. So it's estimated that less than 10% of the water in these events is actual domestic waste. And also, when you think about domestic waste, most of that is actually water as well. So technical experts say that 99.9% of domestic waste is water and 0.1% is actually solids. So I just kind of want to, put that out there as when we do have these events, it is mostly water, and it's still a health concern, and it's still something that we need to deal with. But just want to change that image slightly. So what's been happening historically? The first combined sewer overflow control policy by the state was done in 1990. And so prior to this policy, we had 29 wastewater treatment facilities that had combined sewer overflow outfalls. There were a total of 178 outfalls. So with this control policy, there was requirements to do things like separation and also to control infiltration and inflow. So some of our towns have actual clay pipes in the ground, and so a lot of work was done to replace those clay pipes, but in cases where they were there, you could have, during a storm event, you could have groundwater infiltration and rainwater infiltration to those and also to the manholes. So a lot of work was done by municipalities to get that number down. So in 2015, it went from 178 to 73 outfalls. Say about that. All right. So what are we doing now? In 2016, the Combined Sewer Overflow Rule was adopted in Chapter 34, and the main purpose and goal of this rule is to ensure that all the remaining CSOs in the state of Vermont are brought into compliance with the requirements of federal regs and state regs and Vermont water quality standards. So this rule has a lot of aspects to it in which it has intermediate kind of actions, and I'm going to go through parts of that.
Jessica, can I interrupt for a second? Sure. I just want to make sure I may have you present from just some issues with what we're seeing online. So hold on. Sorry for the interruption. All right. Maybe just share the desktop. Yeah, I'm going to do that. Okay. You're good to go.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Where are we? Finishing. Yep. Oh, moving on.
Moving on.
Okay, so one of the interim requirements is permanent signage. So all municipalities were required to put signs out at their outfall posts, and the state actually provided those signs for each municipality for all their outfalls for the first round. And this is important because some of our outfalls are located near recreation sites. So we want to ensure that the public is aware that during an event they should be avoiding swimming, fishing, any recreational contact. And we do have municipalities check to make sure that these signs are still there. Sometimes they fall down. Sometimes people steal them. I'm not sure. People may want them in their dorm rooms. I don't really know what you do with them, but yeah. So check Norwich and UVM. But so it's a requirement that these signs stay in place to inform the public of the health hazard that CSOs have. Another requirement is to do a public alert notification. So via our ANR online, municipalities are required to report within 1 hour, no later than 4 hours, if they have a CSO event. And then within 12 hours, they need to submit a report that summarizes estimates on flow and times for the events. And one thing that we are working on is we'd like to create a map that goes along with this notification that'll include the outfalls on the map. It can be interactive and can flash red if one is occurring at any given time. And also to note, this is something that you can sign up for. So you can receive alerts at any time one is reported. You can see it for the entire state, or you can choose counties or areas of locations that you want to be notified if there are any notifications of CSO overflows. This site also has untreated and unpermitted discharges. So if they're non-related to wet weather, but if a facility had, say, a sewer main break and there was untreated sewage entering waters of the state, that would also be posted on this website. Continuing with the 2016 requirements. So it's through the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, often referred to as Niftys, which is a Clean Water Act federal requirement, that any facility that discharges waters to this state, they're required to be permitted under this program, and Vermont is an approved program to issue these permits. And what is required in these permits is that the water that is discharged has to meet state and federal requirements, and also they need to meet Vermont water quality standards. Vermont water quality standards dictate that we put limits on any discharge from a facility. These limits include limits on E. coli and pH and total suspended solids, as well as nutrients such as phosphorus and nitrogen. So because these permits require that all discharges meet the Vermont water quality standards, the CSOs don't meet those requirements because they are untreated discharges in many cases. So what the 2016 Combined Sewer Overflow Rule requires is that if the facility is not in compliance, that the agency must issue a order pursuant to 10 VSA Section 1272 or another legally enforceable mechanism requiring the municipality to develop or update a long-term control plan, which is subject to review. So really what that means, we call them 1272s, and the whole legally enforceable just means that if a municipality was not working towards improving or abating their CSOs, that we could get a court order to ensure that they do. Continuing with requirements, there are a number of requirements. There are 9 minimum controls that EPA has established that were also part of the policy back in 1990. One of the new additions is for the long-term control plans, we're requiring alternatives analysis to evaluate costs and performance of multiple CSO control alternatives. And part of that is installing flow metering system for each outfall. This is something that some municipalities have done. This is, Rutland, for instance, has already done this. And these are our analysis of doing it. There are some instances where these facets can't be accomplished, but they need to be part of the alternatives analysis. Then reducing stormwater flows through the separation of combined stormwater and sanitary sewer lines. Adding storage tanks or retention basins to hold overflow during storm events. Places like Enosburg Falls, they have basins to retain the water during the storm event, and then what happens is they feed it back to the wastewater treatment facility at a later time when the event is over so that the water is still treated. Expanding the treatment plant capacity, adding screening and disinfection facilities for the overflow, incorporating green stormwater infrastructure to reduce stormwater flow into the CSS to the greatest extent feasible and practical. This is something that T is going to touch on in a little bit later in the program. And then finally, providing for disinfection of CSOs at the outfall and discharge to a waste management zone.
Nice question.
Yes.
So you said that the CSOs aren't in compliance because they're not meeting Vermont water quality standards.
Right.
But we're not monitoring them. So how do we know? Are we just assuming that they're not meeting the water quality standard for bacteria?
Yes. And probably other things, but I guess we don't necessarily, we don't know. But yes, that's the assumption.
Joseph, if I could follow up on that. We have discharge permits that don't have disinfection requirements for wastewater treatment plants. So there is instances where a wastewater treatment plant can discharge undisinfected, i.e. contains pathogens and bacteria,
Right.
effluent, but yet it must meet water quality standards or else we wouldn't issue them a permit.
Right.
So,
well, water quality standards are applied to each the discharge points of the stream or the lake. So those are defined based on where they're discharging to.
I guess I was just questioning if a wastewater treatment plant can discharge undisinfected effluent and meet water quality standards, wouldn't it make sense that maybe a CSO could?
There is that potential, depending on what body of water they're discharging to. Yep.
The time of the year.
Yes.
Seasonal
Disinfection.
It's seasonal disinfection.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
I think the likely is that it's probably not meeting the 25 NTU turbidity requirement that for Class 2 waters.
It could be.
That's
Yeah.
the more likely.
Yeah.
To understand that that's not good.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it's odd to think we'd ever have a CSO that meets water quality standards, but there could be because of,
Right. Well,
And that's what the rule is, just says meet water quality standards. So yeah. Continuing on requirements. So the rule requires that the agency issue this 1272 order at the same time as the Niftys permit. And one thing is with the Lake Champlain TMDL, we have a number of facilities that are on a schedule to receive their new permits over the next 4 years. And certain facilities aren't scheduled to receive their permits until 2021. And it was a concern of the agency that they would not be working on their long-term control plan prior to that date. So we chose to issue the 1272 order early for places like Rutland and Virgins as they had events. And so they, I believe they're both currently on public notice right now. So one thing that's really important to understand is that this is a costly and long-term process. It is estimated, I showed the slide earlier where there was a reduction from 178 to 73 outfalls from 1990 to 2015. It was estimated that one outfall costs approximately $2.1 million to abate. So this is something that obviously is costly to still remedy in the future, and it does take time because these pipes under our towns are interconnected. So what's the progress since implementation of the 2016 rule? Well, there's been an even further reduction. We went from 19 wastewater treatment facilities to 16, and from 73 outfalls to 53. And I want to point out two municipalities here. Richford had 2 remaining outfalls in 2015, and last year they eliminated their last 2 outfalls, so they are no longer a CSO community. And they did this through separation and controlling their infiltration and inflow into their system. And also Springfield. So you can see Springfield here had 14 in 2015 and is now down to 2. I want to also mention that in 1990 they had 29 outfalls. So they have made a lot of progress on this, and T is going to talk more about that later. And here's a chart. I know this is probably difficult to see, but these are the events that were reported through our A&R online system in 2016 and 2017. And one thing I'll point out is that there are 6 lines. There's 6 lines that are grayed out. Those wastewater treatment facilities have not had events, have not had CSO overflows in the last 2 years. And they have all worked to abate and control the CSOs that they have. I had mentioned Enosburg Falls earlier that has a basin for retention, and they have not had an overflow in 2 years. One thing to be careful when looking at this is that I don't want to pick on anybody, but facilities like Montpelier and Rutland, you see that they're kind of these higher numbers. And part of the process for putting these online is that the municipality needs to record an event when there is an overflow at a single outfall. So for places like Montpelier that has 6 outfalls, for each outfall they have to report it. So it's not, I just want to make sure that folks aren't thinking, oh, it's happened 44 times in that year. That's not the case. It's probably more like 8 times, but because they have to report it separately. And then the last column just shows what municipalities have their new 1272 order under the new rule.
Jessica?
Yeah.
2016, was that, were the numbers being reported the same as they were in 2017?
My understanding is they were, but it was just starting, so it may be on the light side. It may be skewed. Yeah. Thank you.
Jessica, I had a quick question.
Yep.
On your previous slide, there was a lot of systems that had 1s for the number of CSOs. Were a lot of those just designed to specifically save the plant, like hydraulically, whereas there's a whole bunch of other ones that are multiple, where they were just really kind of trying to take the load off the plant,
right?
Versus just saving
a safety valve.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are a lot of those 1 safety valves, or
I would think so. I don't honestly know that, but that it's important to have safety valves too. So
well, some of the single ones, aren't they located at like the pump station? And like in Virginia, don't they have just like 1 at the pump station, which is kind of like, it's a pump station overflow, but it's also a combined sewer overflow because some of their collection systems combined.
They don't have a combined system, according to EPA's definition, so they're getting infiltration.
But it is a main pump station, the biggest pump station in our collection system.
But given that, I can see where multiple millions of dollars to address getting rid of that one safety valve, you've got to, like Enosburg did, you've got to have a plan.
Right.
To store it and treat it, or not have a safety.
Right.
Some repercussions there, insurance-wise, I'm sure.
Right.
For backups in homes and things like that.
In a sense, pump stations can be a safety.
Yeah.
Not that you want it, but I mean, at some point, it's gonna come out somewhere. And
the other thing is that each facility is going to be dependent upon all the topography it runs. In Middlebury, we've got 20 pump stations. So, back before 1960, everything went to the river as a straight pipe. So we had, put an interceptor line in, started collecting all these lines before they went to the river to a pump station. So, each one's going to be dependent upon how everything lays out. So, back in 1990, there was, I don't remember, but 13 CSOs in Middlebury. Now down to 4. Some have been eliminated through CSOs, some have been eliminated through line replacement. But it all is very important to have a relief, because we'd rather discharge to the river than to someone's home, definitely. So, at least my home. What do you guys think?
And with that, I'm going to turn it over to T. Right. Nice work, Jessica.
Yeah.
So this portion is really going to talk about the amount that the state, and specifically the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, which is a loan fund where we get money from EPA every year that's capitalized by state dollars. So CSO investment has been sort of a core foundation of the CWSRF program for 30 years. So just pointing out, as you guys can see, $60 million in loans related to CSO disconnection since 1990. Those are loans, so those are paid back. But on top of that, we have also subsidized those with around $33 million in pollution control grants. And so right now, our pollution control grants are categorical, which means the type of project gets a certain amount of grant eligibility. That's going to change in the next years. But this is just pointing out the fact that, again, for almost 30 years, a huge chunk of our program's investment and focus has been on assisting municipalities in the very expensive and long-term costs related to CSO abatement. So that's a key focus of the program, and it will continue to be a key focus in upcoming years. So here we have Springfield. Springfield's kind of our shining star right now. Jessica talked about the numbers, so just the numbers on their own. 1990 was 29 to 2015 was 14, and currently is 2. There are 2 left. So they have invested through the CWSRF program around $12 million in the past 15 years. So for small communities like this, these are significant resources and significant local efforts made in trying to address these issues. So I think the point that we want to make over and over again in the communities and the projects that we highlight here is that these are taken seriously, and a lot of money is put into these projects. During the ERA period, so this is stimulus, so back in the 2010-ish time period was our stimulus years. A couple $1 million got put towards projects in Springfield, and additional money for pollution control grants throughout the years. So some of our staff had conversations with Springfield in preparation for this, because we really wanted to highlight the significant local effort as well as the state and local investment in these projects, in these great reduction numbers. So they've removed 400 catch basins. They've upgraded their wastewater treatment facility, as is one of those practices that Jessica highlighted earlier. So since their CSO corrections were completed, so we'll talk about this many times throughout the rest of this presentation, but this reducing peak flows to the wastewater treatment plant is just a really key sort of interim step in dealing with the CSO events during a heavy rain event. So they've increased what the plant can accept in a heavy rain event. It's also had significant energy savings with some of their upgrades, so some side benefits. This was an interesting local decision that was made. There was a large, I believe it was a theater. Tom, do you remember? There was a large building that the town actually noted that was for sale, and it was about a 4-acre lot that was previously completely impervious surface. So what they did as a local decision is they purchased this building, tore it down, and turned it into pervious surface. So just making these local decisions to do what can be done locally to prevent a huge heavy rain event surging a ton of amount of water to the wastewater treatment facility. So while these big $1 million separation projects are cool and the ultimate goal, I think it's important to highlight some of these local proactive decisions to really work on that sort of hydraulic loading. The current project that we are funding, I believe construction is ongoing throughout this year and maybe next year, I don't know, is what we call the J&L CSO project. So J&L is a very large industrial building, and this project is disconnecting roof drains from the sanitary sewer. So this project has eliminated 6 CSOs. Is that project complete? Who knows that? Do you know, Jeff? It is? Okay. I think it is complete. So that's what finally got Springfield down to 2 remaining CSOs. So significant investment both from the state and local efforts on these great numbers from Springfield. So, and then you can see at the bottom, Springfield, Vermont, obviously was chosen as the Simpsons Springfield, so had to highlight that. Now, Rutland, Rutland has been mentioned in some of the bigger numbers of having overflow events. We wanted to highlight, again, some of the CSO work that's happened there. So this specific project was the Northwest Neighborhood Project. They received a loan from us in the neighborhood of about $4 million with a grant of about $1.3 million. Work to reduce or eliminate raw sewage going into East Creek, reducing street flooding from stormwater. Again, we're repeating this over and over again, reducing that hydraulic loading to the wastewater treatment facility, so those surge events don't lead to overflow events. They've done, we'll talk a little bit later about some of the sort of more long-term planning and asset management work that Rutland has done. But, in this project, 850 collection structures inspected. And then in general, they've incorporated a really aggressive street sweeping program.
Do you know when that happened?
I would say 2015, 16, somewhere in there. Yep. And they have additional, so we put out a call for projects every year, and Rutland has a number of additional CSO projects that are in the queue of planning and design right now. So they have not let a lot of daylight sunset between finishing one significant CSO separation and continuing forward for the next. So pretty aggressive attempt at mitigating their CSO issues in Rutland. So the next few communities that we're going to highlight, they have all come to our office for funding in one facet or another. And we're titling these roughly asset management, which doesn't automatically seem like it makes sense for a CSO separation discussion. But the reality is these are really, really expensive projects that have a lot of moving parts to them. And so if our communities don't know what their plan is long term, they can't really go for the projects that are best bang for their buck and that are going to give them, the prioritization of the steps that they need to go through. So when we're talking about asset management and assessment conditions and prioritization and criticality and all those good steps for asset management, these are the communities that we're really highlighting for really taking some pretty significant steps forward to look at that. So City of Burlington has two pretty comprehensive projects. This first one is $1 million gravity pipe assessment project. They came into our office 2016. This work is ongoing. We forgave half of that, so they'll only have to pay back $500,000 instead of a full $1 million. I believe they got some money from the ERP funds. They got a grant through the Clean Water Initiative program. This is a massive snapshot of their system. Prioritization of 548 manholes, about 134,000 linear feet of the city's critical combined sewer piping. So all of their combined and sanitary sewer is given a criticality score, calculated it using in GIS using that triple bottom line approach. So triple bottom line is kind of fancy speak for when they're considering projects, they're not only considering just the water quality benefits, they're also looking at the social impacts, economic and environmental benefits of doing each project. So what they've done is they haven't done it yet. What they are doing is they're taking a look at their system, figuring out the top 20% of those projects based on their criticality, and then they're figuring out the likelihood of failure. So the final goal is for them to have a database of pretty much their entire system, their proposed rehab strategies, including strategies to abate and disconnect their CSOs, timelines, and funding costs. So this is like the Cadillac of what we're talking about when we're talking about asset management and how it can really use those kind of concepts to really boost compliance with Jessica's shop in CSO work. That's what we're trying to do, is make Niftys satisfied. So this is so Burlington gets two shouts out in this program. I'm gonna give this one a pretty brief overview, but I felt that it was important to mention it. Burlington is working on becoming kind of a first in the nation for an integrated permit, and there are, I know probably Lynette could explain this way better than me, but integrated management essentially looks at the entire snapshot of the city's sources of phosphorus loading on Lake Champlain, and it essentially says, okay, instead of just dealing with stormwater and then wastewater over here and all these other different sources, let's look at the holistic snapshot and figure out the sort of best strategy to mitigate all of our sources of phosphorus. So they came into us for around a $600,000 CWSRF loan. We gave them $250,000 in forgiveness that they don't have to pay back. So again, trying to incentivize these kinds of concepts. But the project will focus on reduction or mitigation. So this is less of a goal of disconnection of CSOs and more of all right, in the meantime, how do we deal with reduction or mitigation of wet weather input whenever we have infiltration of wet weather? So where can we possibly store it, or if we can't store it, in the case of, who did you say had the bin?
Enosburg Falls.
Yes. So in the case of like Enosburg Falls, where they can, store it, send it back to the treatment facility, or if that's not possible, a slower release that will allow for infiltration where it is. Primarily looking for solutions that utilize green stormwater infrastructure, which we'll talk about that later, and where green stormwater is not feasible, utilizing gray stormwater. So this integrated management project is a whole lot more than just CSO related or CSO abatement, but it is a facet of the project. So I felt like it was forward enough thinking
of dealing with these wet weather events that it was worth a shout out on the planning. And then a deliverable of this project will be that long-term control plan that Jessica and company will be requiring of them to make sure that they more directly target their CSOs. So lots of stuff happening in Burlington. This is the town of Hartford. This is a very near and dear to my heart project. This was around a $240,000 loan. Again, we forgave 50% of that. The Clean Water Initiatives program gave them a $30,000 asset management grant, which helped supplement this project. This is a really unique project that took a while to put together as far as like planning it, because the town was only interested in doing an asset management plan if they could do it themselves, which was a first for our program. Typically, they hire a consultant. They had a significant amount of staff that was getting ready to retire, and these were the staff that had been with the system since it was built. And so these were the people that knew where all the pipes were, they knew where the pumps were, they knew the bad spots. And so to try and capture that information, they felt that really they were the best ones to construct what an asset management plan would look like for their system. So they funded an aerial flight to map out the existing drain and sewer manholes and catch basins.
Did they use the hot air balloon?
They didn't use the hot air balloon. They used an actual balloon. That was our one joke that we practiced for this event. So the project also funded a GPS unit that town staff, so again, these are in motion right now, so that they are utilizing for accuracy. Looking at a snapshot of about 75% of their wastewater lines, 20,000 feet of drain lines. Again, much of the work is completed what we call force account work, which is really using the town's engineering staff and on-the-ground staff to map out what their system looks like. So their ultimate goal is to have because, you know, I've been to the Hartford Select Board meetings multiple times on this project, and you know the message and the Select Board's been very progressive and very receptive to these ideas, and they always say, well, how can we know which projects we should be doing for disconnection if we don't even know what we have and we don't even know what shape it's in? So I remember one of the Select Board members said, it's like somebody trying to tell you that you need to do a ton of work underneath your car hood and you've never been able to pop it and take a look at it. So I always think of that when I think of this project. So this is a pretty progressive and pretty unique project, just that in the force account, the force account nature of the town doing the work themselves. This is Rutland again. This is a H&H CSO modeling project. This is really trying to get a good snapshot of where the water goes in the system and when. This was a $250,000 loan that they only have to pay back $125,000. So I continue to point that out so that it's always recognized that these are real priority projects for our program. So we're always looking at better ways to target and incentivize these sort of forward-facing progressive utilization of asset management concepts to help them sort of get to the best place they need to for their system. So the modeling the collection system to help plan for future improvements. As Jessica mentioned, they've installed real-time monitors at all of their locations, trying to get a more accurate snapshot of where the water flows. They installed 5 swirl separators. They are planning to install data infrastructure monitors and controls in the collection system once the model is completed. And then this is just, probably could have gone with the other slide, but this is again just to reinforce the fact that Rutland's not stopping. Like, they're pretty aggressively looking for the future of continuing to deal with their CSO abatement. So they have, this says 2 separation projects. I think it's more like 4 that we have on our list, but so they're in various stages of moving forward. Jessica, what's green stormwater infrastructure?
So we've been tossing this out a bit throughout the presentation, and so what is GSI? It's a complementary and sometimes alternative system to a traditional or gray infrastructure to manage runoff from developed lands.
Jessica, what's gray infrastructure?
It's the closed system of pipes, catch basins, and storm drains traditionally used to convey stormwater runoff to off-site locations where it is then discharged without treatment to surface waters. And this isn't to be confused with the combined system. So this is a complete separate system. So there's no sewage involved with this, but it's just stormwater. And so what green stormwater infrastructure utilizes infiltration, evapotranspiration, storage, and reuse to mimic natural hydrologic processes. GSI is decentralized by design and either prevents runoff from occurring or treats it as close to the source as possible. And this is an aspect of the alternatives analysis within the long-term control plan that we've asked for our 1272 orders.
Good. As I mentioned, we're always looking for new and exciting ways to try and target all kinds of different aspects of not only CSOs, but in this case, we're talking about green stormwater, which would, help with sort of the loading of the combined sewer system. So we are proposing this year. I think most of our municipalities are aware of this, but we've been working pretty hard to come up with this green stormwater sponsorship pilot. Green stormwater is not always possible. It's often not. But what we wanted to do is incentivize green stormwater practices where it is possible. We believe it's cheaper, less maintenance, better bang for your buck. And again, it reduces the amount of flow. The goal of green stormwater, the ultimate goal is to try and infiltrate, so pretty much mimic nature as much as possible. So in this sponsorship pilot, we are proposing to pair two projects together. So when a town needs to come in for a pipe replacement project, we want them to identify a green stormwater project that they can couple it together with. And once both projects are completed, we will forgive the green stormwater piece. So that's like the long and short of that. So I won't belabor this much, just that, again, that it's another avenue to get two projects sort of for the price of one. So that ratio is about 10 to 1. So $1 million project has about $100,000 green stormwater piece that can be forgiven. We've set aside about $1 million for this pilot just to kind of see if it works. And of that, we have a $300,000 cap per borrower, and so it will be first come, first serve, and so we're proposing that in our current plan, which that money will be available later this year. Whoa,
Yeah.
that happened quickly. All right. So with that, any questions?
Questions in the room or online? Go ahead, Jim.
I wonder about any analysis done on the cumulative impact of CSO disconnection and associated impacts from stormwater and low precipitation events that was being treated by wastewater treatment plants now being discharged.
That's a great question. I don't know. Do you want me
Do you mind repeating it? Just because.
Yeah, I think basically what the ask is that in these communities where there's been separation and now stormwater is discharging directly to the waters of the state as opposed to going to the wastewater treatment facility, have we seen water quality impacts from that?
Yeah, is it actually a net benefit in the small storm events that tend to have the most concentrated stormwater? If there's capacity in the wastewater.
If there's capacity, right.
Allow that to continue to go there.
Right, if there's capacity, we want to allow it to go there. I don't know of any analysis that has been done to look at that.
I wonder about the implications there for TMDL.
TMDL, no, that's,
Load allocations.
right,
If they're presumed to go to wastewater treatment plants.
and now they're suddenly not, right. It's a concern, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so where would green stormwater infrastructure not be possible? You mentioned that there's some places where it wouldn't be, or like what kind of factors would be,
Places like Rutland. Oh, did you want to jump in?
I gave her the look like, Lynette, answer this.
Yeah.
But green stormwater practices typically
depend on being able to infiltrate.
Okay.
And some soil conditions are just very poor, and that can't happen.
So is
There's not land
Rutland
available.
clay? Is Rutland pretty clay-ish? I don't know.
Can be.
In the Pacific Northwest neighborhood, we had evaluated green infrastructure in the PER, but when it came to the final design, the groundwater table was too high
Oh,
to be
gotcha.
able to support the green infrastructure, and additionally, they had like basically low percolation rates, so that it was just a bad fit for that neighborhood.
Thanks. Sort of similar to Chip's question is as we're promoting green stormwater infrastructure, have we looked at the groundwater quality impacts, the impacts on groundwater? And particularly in urban settings where the stormwater is being generated on, dense, dense streets, versus a more rural setting where it's coming off of things like roofs or something, where you have the hydrocarbons and that type of thing. So, just curious if that's been looked at.
As far as I know, it has not yet been looked at, but.
Do you guys, when you were talking about plotting out where the outfalls for the combined sewer overflow is and putting it on a map where it's,
Yep.
is that gonna be on A&R Atlas? Or
Yes.
It is, okay.
Yep.
Okay, great, yeah, just because
That's the plan.
even the discussion about East Creek, that's one of the areas that the macro and fish communities haven't done so well, so I want to go back and.
Be great to see exactly where they are, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
just When we're doing our assessments, we have a quick place to.
Yep.
What's the timeline for
I'm
finishing
hoping
that?
by the end of the year, and that's something that Amy and Nick are helping along with our IT department on. So it's great, and I believe Matt's been helping as well. Yep.
Other questions for Jessica and Dee?
Nick.
How long is the green stormwater pilot program going on? Just for this year? Is it going to continue?
Maybe. We kind of, so we're piloting it this year to see if it works. So the eligibility will go until June 30 of 19. And I think we'll have the ability then as a program to say, does this work or does this not work? And we'll evaluate whether we want to continue it. Yep. Annette?
St. Johnsbury and some of the rural development funding.
I don't know enough to speak to that, but if you do, I don't know enough about the project types.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out to St. Johnsbury because they have been very aggressively pursuing their CSO and separation projects, and they have a TMDL for E. coli up there that they've been working on as well. So they have been pursuing their planning funding with us, and then their construction funding with rural development. So that's been a really good pairing for them. So it's not like we're the only funding shop in town.
Yeah, yep, that's a good point. Not by far.
Other questions? Great. Well, thank you both. Thanks to everyone for coming. And just a reminder, we offer these lectures. It's the second Thursday of the month, and they're focused on implementation of the Vermont Clean Water Act and other clean water work in the state. And they're 11 to noon typically here in the Winooski room, and also online via Skype for Business. So you can learn more at the Clean Water Initiative outreach page. So thanks again to Jeff and T.
Thanks.
Thanks for the balloon show.
Damn, that made my day.
Way to go.
We worked on that pretty hard.